Hey everybody, it's Bronco from Apex. Today I wanted to share something that I've talked a lot about over the years. I've talked about, in my viewpoint, I look at athletes and I think there's two different types of athletes. I group them in these two groups. There are pit bulls and there are poodles. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, one, and I know some people will point out, well, poodles are very smart. That's great. But we all know poodles are show dogs, okay? And so a lot of times your athletes, if they're in that poodle group, they may look great, they might have even great talent, and if everything's going right and there's not too much friction, they might even be able to put out a good performance. But when things get rough, poodles are not interested. Okay? When you got to put your head down and grind, put in the work, poodles fold. Now, on the other hand, you have pit bulls. And I always tell athletes, you want to be a pit bull. Because we all know, once a pit bull bites down, it's not letting go. You're going to have, it's just, that's it. It's not letting go. It's a wrap. And pit bulls grind. They work hard. They're not worried about getting dirty. They're going to put that work in. And this kind of brings up a bigger point that I want to make with this video. Now again, we have these two groups, pit bulls and poodles. Poodles, yeah, if everything's going right, they look good, they look the part, they look like a pole vaulter, they look like an athlete, but, times get tough. I don't know what you're going to get out of that poodle. The pit bull, it doesn't matter. Athletes that I think about in my mind, just to give you examples, athletes that I think about in my mind, and to give you some more context, who I would classify as pit bulls, I'll tell you what, weather conditions don't matter. I've seen athletes that I put in that pit bull classification. It could be raining. Made no difference. Nice tall posture on the runway, plant timing. They obviously figured out a way to keep their pole dry so they wouldn't slip grip. And look, they may not PR. I mean, let's not go crazy. Weather conditions are going to hinder your performance. But they're going to jump as high as possible that day. And if they're supposed to win, they're going to get that win. Rain or shine. Poodles, on the other hand, and trust me, I have had athletes who are poodles. If the weather conditions aren't right, maybe they don't feel like they could get a PR today, they fold. They're barely running down the runway. You're going to get, very poor jumps, very poor effort. And that's where the poor jumps are coming from, is the effort. Not a pit bull, though. Pit bulls are going to work through it. They're going to figure it out. In fact, I remember one of my athletes who I would definitely consider a pit bull. When she was in high school, she went to a high school that she might in total have 5 meets the whole year, indoor and outdoor track. And I remember going to her outdoor meet, one of her outdoor meets. I was driving out to it, and it was an early spring meet, and in the Northeast, it's usually going to be chilly. And on top of it, there was a light drizzle in and out the whole day. And I'll be honest, I don't like the cold. You know, I'm not a fan of the cold. And I'm driving out to this meet, and I'm thinking to myself, man, this is terrible conditions. But as I'm driving out, I start to think to myself, I go, wait a second. This might be the only meet I get to go to during outdoors. She, I think, only had like 2 more meets after that meet. I go, I cannot look like I'm unhappy in this poor weather. I have to come to this meet with a good attitude. And you know what? That athlete, she had the same attitude. And that day, I mean, this athlete, she would end up jumping 12 in college. But at the time, going into that meet, her PR was 8.6 or 9. And in those conditions, she actually PR'd. She jumped 9.6. Meanwhile, there was a girl at that meet who had a 12-foot PR and jumped 10. And from a full approach, by the way. So it just goes to show our mental attitude, our approach to things can have a huge impact on our performance and our outcome, our result. And when I'm talking about pit bulls and poodles, again, if you notice, I didn't mention a PR because it's not about PR. It's a mentality. Regardless of your ability level, your PR, your mental approach to things is very, very important. And for the coaches that are listening to this, I just, I ask, what kind of mental approach or perspective do you want your athletes to have? Do you want them to be a poodle? And when conditions aren't right, there's a few extra variables or hurdles in the way, they give up? Or do you want to teach your athletes to have the perspective and the mental approach to put their head down and put the work in? Try to overcome the obstacles. Because the thing that I think about, and for athletes that are listening to this too, life is difficult. Life is hard. You are going to encounter obstacle after obstacle, hurdle after hurdle in life. And they will be way tougher than any pole vault obstacle. I have far too often, and look, I'm guilty of this, at a certain point in my career, definitely coaching certain athletes, when we were chasing certain marks or records, for example, I remember going to meets and thinking, this is a waste. The conditions aren't right. There's no way that we're going to get a PR today. But at a certain point, I started to see how my approach and my perspective was actually going onto the athletes. And I had athletes that if they felt like they couldn't PR, they almost didn't even want to compete that day. And I started thinking, I'm like, you know what? I'm setting a poor example for my athletes. Because that's not the approach that we should have. Hey, and look, by all means, I'm not telling anybody to jump in dangerous conditions. That's not what I'm talking about. But if there's a competition, there's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser that day. And I think you could almost, in many conditions or situations, figure out a way to compete safely. And look, I've had athletes that don't like certain venues. They think the runway is slow, and then they're disappointed if that's the meet we're going to. But again, there's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser that day. And I'm not just talking about the medal. I'm not just talking about the placing. There are going to be winners and losers that day. There's going to be people that figure things out, find a way to compete at the best that they can. And there's going to be people that give up. And the thing is, if we're really trying to prepare our athletes of any age, because I coach adults too, if we're trying to train our athletes to be better prepared for life, we need to give them this pit bull mentality. That, you know what? If it gets tough, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to clamp down. I'm going to get it done today. I can't say, again, and I've made the mistake, but I can't tell you how often I've seen coaches go to meets and you could see the disappointment if, the wind's not right and it's not going to be a tailwind today, it's going to be a headwind, and they're already complaining before the athletes start warming up. What do you think your athlete's going to think then? And look, I know too, especially being a club coach, there are scenarios where I have athletes who, they have to go through their track practice. And sometimes they have coaches that, maybe make them run a little bit too much. I mean, we're pole vaulters, right? The longest approach you're going to have is 150 feet. I don't know how necessary repeat 300s are. But that being said, I try to, at this point in my coaching career, explain to kids that, well, listen, let's talk about this. How do we deal with this? If you really have to do these workouts, let's talk about what you need to do to be better prepared for these workouts so they don't knock you out. And also, some of these athletes want to do these other events. So you got to help them navigate this, not tell them that it's impossible to jump high because of X, Y, and Z. We have to give these kids a tougher mentality, and I said kids, but again, even with my adults, I could go to an open meet sometimes where some of my adults, they seem upset because of whatever condition or the runway, or maybe there's a certain pole they need and they don't have it. Okay, we'll figure it out. We're going to figure it out and we're going to do the best that we can today. That is a life skill you need. Because not every day is going to be amazing. Not every day are you going to have the perfect set of variables or circumstances for the day. But you have to get through the day the best that you can. So it's pit bull or poodle. Like I said, poodles, sometimes, if everything's right, they can get it done. But if it's not perfect conditions, it's tough. They quit. They fold. Pit bulls, though, they're going to find a way. A pit bull is going to find a way to get the job done. I know I want to help my athletes be a pit bull, and I certainly want to be a pit bull. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, everybody.